Hello there. One guest on GB News today said that the sanctions we place on Russia could end up backfiring on the West. GB News host Isabel Oakeshott had a very interesting conversation with Jim Rickards about economic warfare and the way in which sanctions could backfire on those who impose them. And the basic idea is that when you place sanctions on one country that drags it down, then the financial distress it suffers follows the same process as a virus and spreads out across the globe. In fact, when asked by Oakeshott if he thought these sanctions against Russia were a mistake, he basically answered yes, because of how interconnected global economies are. And right now, according to financial reports, the Russian economy is in severe financial distress, with the ruble having plummeted, interest rates doubled to 20%, and signs of Soviet-era food shortages. If Rickards is right, then how do we stop that spreading like a virus to us? But as we look around in the UK, we can already see it beginning to affect us too. Although, to be fair, our government did say this would happen. But can they limit the damage, is the question. And right now the EU is split on whether to go for the fifth set of sanctions that involves cutting Russian oil and gas off completely, as well as pushing the last Russian banks out of the SWIFT financial system. Many EU member states want to see this happen, but for obvious reasons Germany does not, because it cannot survive without Russian hydrocarbons. Now Rickards, who has advised the likes of the CIA on economic warfare, says he's pleased that one backdoor has been left open for Russia, at least for now. And that is in allowing Russia to continue to pay its sovereign debt commitments in dollars. Because without that, he says, global debt liquidity would be put at risk, something that would pile a global financial crisis on top of the effects of the pandemic and this war. And he also talked about the West stopping the sale of semiconductors to Russia, something that will severely dent their technology and defence sectors. But for us to make those semiconductors in the West for ourselves and to sell to the Russians, we first need to buy high-grade neon gas for the laser manufacturing process. And we get most of that from Odessa in Ukraine. Then there's all the countries out there that rely on Ukraine and Russia itself for their grains to make food. Without that, what do they eat? And with less wheat, for example, out there, then the price of bread goes up in the UK. Jim Rickards also talks about the unintended consequences of what we're doing. Our central banks, civil servants and all their politicians and their advisors may think they know the likely outcomes, but how sure are we that they are right? And how sure are we that they're telling us everything? One thing Rickards did say is that previous sanctions had led the likes of Russia, India and China to talk about bypassing the dollar, something that could lead to a reduction in its influence, especially if people no longer used it on the oil markets. The era of the petrodollar would be put at risk. And right now we hear that India is working with Russia on finding a way to bypass sanctions and is said to be mulling over several options, including opening up an alternative payment route by linking the Indian Unified Payments interface with the Russian faster payment system, as well as facilitating interbank transactions. With LiveMint.com quoting an anonymous Indian government official as saying, "All these options are on the table and are being discussed by the two governments, the Reserve Bank of India and the Bank of Russia." And India has already got a load of Russian oil at discounted prices. So what should the Western response be? To sanction India like Russia, so forming a new political bloc and one that China, amongst others, might opt to join in with? The question is, are we too trusting of our politicians to not end up pulling not just Russia, but the whole global house of cards down? And that would have to be a monumental mistake, wouldn't it? Because no one would ever plan to do something that drastic, would they?